This is Things Police See, First-Hand Accounts, with your host, Steve Gould.
Welcome to the podcast that interviews active and retired police officers about their most intense, bizarre, and sometimes humorous moments on the job. I'm Steve Gould, everybody. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for finding the podcast. Like it says in the intro, this is just a podcast that sits down with the men and women of law enforcement, and we hear their true, unedited stories of what they encounter and what they see in their line of work, and with the idea that you will gain a better appreciation for what the men and women of law enforcement are out there doing for you. Thank you for all the recent 5-star reviews on Apple Podcasts. I appreciate it. We're almost, I'd like to get to 1,000, as you know. We're up to 850 something. So they roll in every week, and I really appreciate that, guys. So thank you for that. Quite icy up here. Right before the podcast, I was out using my ice scraper as a pickaxe to get our cars undone. Did the thing where it snowed and then it rained and then it snowed. Quite awful. But, I tell everybody I love the seasons, and I do. Just when you're getting sick of winter, spring rolls around. So that's what I've been up to, guys, burning some calories in the driveway. And I have to say, we have a tractor, which I've never used for snow before because I've never owned a tractor, but it's a little tractor, and it's amazing. It's nothing more fun than using your tractor to remove snow. I came home the other day. My neighbor, who's very gracious, had already done my driveway for me, and I was a little bit disappointed because I wanted to run the tractor and feel like a real man for once in my life. But that's what I've been going on, guys. Yeah, like I said, thank you for the downloads and reviews. I appreciate it. Today we have an international guest. So far the show has had guests from Germany, England, Ireland, and Canada. And today we have another Canadian gentleman. He's been on the Toronto Police Department for 21 years. He's a Detective Constable. He's working in gang prevention. Also, been a UFC cornerman. He was the national champion in wrestling, made it to Olympic trials, and he's the host of the Engage 416 podcast. You can find him on Instagram at TPS Shrekky. Let me, without further ado, let me bring on Shawn Geris. Sir!
How are you?
I'm good, man. I don't have to tell you about removing snow.
No. Well, it sounds like you got more snow than we do right now.
Yeah.
But it's coming. Early Wednesday, we're going to be hit with a bunch of snow. So
you guys must have it down to a science. Like out here, I live kind of on the edge of the hill towns, and it seems like if you even go up a couple 100 feet elevation, it can totally change the climate. So, like I said, it snowed. I was like, all right, I can deal with snow. It was powdery and cold, and then it got warm, and it rained on the snow. Then it snowed again. It was like, I'm not lying. I was out there like with the ice chipper sideways, like gang, trying to get it loose. Sucks.
Yeah, I've been there, man. It's crazy.
I bet
it's crazy.
You guys probably get people like trapped in their houses out there, like in the outskirts.
Yeah, well, tell you the truth, Buffalo this year, which is about, I'm trying to think, it's about an hour and a bit away from where I live. It got hit really bad, and people were trapped in their houses there, just by the lake and stuff like that. So it's pretty crazy to see that.
Yeah, I heard in Buffalo, if you get trapped in your house, you should just close your eyes and die because the city is terrible.
Yeah, I haven't done that before, but I can see that.
Yeah, it's sad. I know people who grew up there, and now when they like go back, they're like, "Oh my gosh, this place is terrible."
Yeah, I've been to concerts down there. I went and saw Blake Shelton at some hockey games there. But man, driving in there and seeing the city just kind of falling apart. It's sad to see.
Yeah, we were going to plan a family trip. It was like I think between Bar Harbor or Niagara Falls, and everybody's like, just go to the Canadian side, get your passport because you don't want to stay in Buffalo.
Yeah. True. Yeah, it's Niagara Falls, Canada usually gets a lot of Americans there, which is nice.
Yeah, that's cool. I always felt like there was, it was weird. I was reading an article the other day, like a little pop-up thing that popped up, and it was saying that Canadians didn't like Americans, and I could see that for some reasons, maybe hockey rivalries or something, but I've been there several times, and the Canadians are so welcoming and so friendly. Like I never, they always seemed happy to see Americans, you know?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, that's kind of a shock to me. I went to school down in California and in Michigan. So for me, I mean, you guys were really hospitality. The hospitality that you guys extend to us when we're down there is amazing. I don't know why we have a hate on for you. I have seen, it might be Ryan Reynolds' video where he talks about he doesn't want you guys moving up to Canada. So I think maybe that's where it's coming from, but I don't think Ryan Reynolds means it.
That's funny. Yeah. Well, the only time I ran into something was, and I mean, probably totally warranted. We took a bus from Western Mass for $99 for the weekend went to Montreal. And we're all 19 and we could drink up there, so that's why we went. So I'm sure we were total jerks. But the French, the more French people did not have a lot of disdain for us. It seemed like they didn't really like anybody, but they really didn't like us.
Well, if you don't speak French, they, up there, and there's, a lot of people in Ontario here that don't. But if you don't speak French up there, sometimes you are treated differently. So,
yeah, you're the outside. But that's what's so cool about Canada is that it has some of those cities really do feel like another country. It's really neat.
Mm-hmm.
It's very in places really ornate and old, kind of like Boston, like very very old school, very cool. We went to Nova Scotia, and on the way up there, you know where Truro is? Truro, Canada. It's like, it's out there. But we had the bottom of our camper, one of our holding tanks broke and fell off, and it was like, just so happened half mile up the road there was a mom and pop garage, and these guys. I mean, I had my family with me. He could see the panic in my eyes. I'm like, I don't know what we're gonna do, where we're gonna go, and we're in another country. These guys, he had all three of his mechanics come out. They all got underneath the camper. One guy had gone to Walmart, which is like an hour and a half away. He'd bought some come-along straps for himself. He used 2 out of the 4 of the package for me to get the under of the camper secured. They're under there, and it's gray water, but it's everywhere. It's like stinky, and they're in it. They do the job, and then they wouldn't take any money. So I went to the owner of the shop, and I was like, I gave him $50 or something. I was like, this is all the cash I have. I just, thank you so much. And they're like, I'd like to think that if this happened in the States, you guys would do the same. And I was like, I would like to think that too.
But those are good people up there in Nova Scotia. They're again, you go from area to area, you'll find there's some really, really unique personalities just in every province, tell you the truth.
Yeah, I bet.
They're very accommodating, very friendly.
It's too bad. It's so huge. It's like the U.S. It's huge, so it's kind of hard to. I don't know if I'll ever make it to the West Coast, like Vancouver and all those places. But I heard it's got incredible places. So you work at. It's funny how I found you was I think you followed the show account, and it said TPS Shawn Geris or TPS Shrekky, and I thought this guy is a super fan of my show. He put it in his, because I refer to it in short as TPS, Things Police See.
Oh,
so I go, man, we got a real fanboy here. And then I go to your page and I'm like, damn, it's Toronto Police Service. So.
Oh yeah, sorry about that.
But anyways, I was happy to find you because you're super active on social media. You belong to a huge department. You have a crazy and interesting resume. So I'm glad I found you that way. Gang prevention in Toronto, clearly a major city, huge city. What is that like up there, and I'm just curious because down here I'm only familiar with West Coast gangs or New York, and they're all kind of Bloods, Crips, and then you have a million other ones, and then you have the motorcycle gangs. Are these derivatives of those, or are these their own self-sustaining groups?
Self-sustaining groups. They're, I think with anything, American culture, we watch American TV. We have, we have Canadian television as well, but the content is very limited. So we watch a lot of your television. We get a lot of your movies coming up here. And as a result of that sort of thing, a lot of the fads or, influences come up here. And I think it started, back in the day when, the movies about gang subculture came out, very similar, like the movie Colors with Robert Duvall and Sean Penn, Boys in the Hood. those movies, I think they kind of planted the seed, I guess. And as a result of that, I mean, they're not connected. They're their own entity, but they started to take up, names. Like we have a Driftwood Crips is a well-known gang up here in the city of Toronto. You can Google that, as well. But the Crips, it comes from the Inglewood, I think it's Inglewood area Crips. That's where the namesake comes. There's no connection. But the name, Driftwood is the neighborhood or the street complex that it actually is there. And we have a few like that. Like there's, more and more. But now, I think, I was talking to a U.S. Detective in Battle Creek, Michigan. He was saying that the new thing is this hybrid gangs where, these gangs are, they don't really follow, the same way of operating as the traditional national recognized gangs. That's his quote. They kind of operate on their own, where they're, they don't have a hierarchy anymore, and they just operate as these nefarious characters, causing no good.
Really? So they must be that just kind of sticking to their neighborhoods, and they're not having any kind of broad agreements or anything like that. Is it very segregated there? Like here, is it like black gangs, Latino gangs, white gangs? Same idea?
No, it depends on who's living in the neighborhood, and they don't take sides like that, and then that's what's happening with this. One of the other characteristics of the hybrid gangs is that there's no ethnicity boundary, there at all. So you'll have, you could have white, black, Somalian. Maybe some Spanish, Latino. But yeah, it's up here and it doesn't discriminate.
Wow. Geez, at least they got that going for them. It's a little bit better than down here. Yeah. Cause here you go in the jails. It's just, it's all by race pretty much. And I mean, it's funny cause I was a cop on Cape Cod. I don't know if you feel like Massachusetts has a little arm that sticks out. It was made famous by the Kennedys because the Kennedy compound in Hyannis and all that. And, it's one of those places where the population doubles or triples in the summer. So it does get busy. But, they had Barnstable is a bigger town. They've tried to make a city before. They want to stay a town. It's like, I think 70 or 80,000 people. It's not huge, but for Cape Cod, it's large. And they had gangs pop up. And they sounded silly, like the white t-shirt crew or something like that, and some other ones, and we all made fun of them. But that's almost worse because they started doing really, really bad things, and I think it was because they feel like they didn't get any cred. Like they didn't have a national name attached, or they didn't make a whatever. So it was all these basically white kids on Cape Cod, and like I was going down Route 6 in Eastham one day, and we got a report of a girl who looked like she'd been badly beaten up walking towards the highway. So I took the first road off to the left, and there she was, shirt ripped, blood all over her face, hair pulled, just a crap beat out of her. And it was a gang stomping in Eastham, which is like a little beach community, and that's when it made me think like, wow, like this, any gang can be super dangerous if they get steam and if they're really, looking to prove themselves. They want to be legit. It's almost worse because they're just seeing it, like you said, in the media, and then they're trying to replicate it. And I don't know if they have a hard limiter on what they're doing. Like how far do we go? Yeah. So I've seen that in like, even like kind of suburban or rural areas in Massachusetts, which I thought was bizarre. And I mean, kind of what we get like gangs 101 and police academy and then in our training, but it's mostly like, they're looking for something cohesive, like something to belong to, right? Like the family structure is weak, so they find a place to get stature and rank and notoriety through this gang. That's the basis, pretty much.
Well, yeah, that's one of the risk factors. I think we commonly kind of gravitate towards the poor parental supervision, and that's what causes it. But there's a lot of push and pull factors that come from academia that actually, the more you have, there's a higher propensity for you to actually get involved in these gangs. And some of it, there's actually various headings. And when you start doing some reading about it, with these risk factors, and they come into the risk factors that come into play. There's individual risk factors, school risk factors, peer group risk factors, family risk factors, and community risk factors. So some of the risk factors, if you have one or two of these, it's not gonna pull you into this this gang culture. But if you have more than a handful and they start piling up, you're going to be, there's a higher propensity, like I said. But some of the, I'll give you an example of just some of the other ones that come into play. Under community, if there's already a gang existing in the community, that's the kids in that neighborhood. There's a higher propensity for them to get involved. Cultural norms supporting the gang. If that community already has, a gang, one, but if they have people within the community that actually support the culture, and if you've worked in various gang impacted neighborhoods, you start to realize that there are people in the community that actually do support the gangs, whether they've been kind of, I guess, recruited to help out. You'll have mothers of newborns where the gang will supply them with diapers or baby formula, and they'll do favors for the gang members. It could be transporting narcotics. It could be just being a lookout for police. Just little things like that. Their supports. Right. You have a community like that. Again, it's another push and pull factor, but the individual pull factors, when you start looking at those, or the family risk factors, because that's what you had mentioned, and that's kind of popular with belief of anybody's poor parent or family. It's drug or alcohol abuse in the family, family violence and neglect. I mean, often if you talk to gang members, and I've had a few on our show, or even reading about gang members, there's a few good books that I've read, but, a lot of these things are actually present within their lives. A family member's already been, there's a gang member. So the younger sibling is like, I want to be just like him, whether or not the older sibling is like, yeah, come up and join us. The parents, I've had it where the parents are involved in criminality, just antisocial behavior as well, and economic deprivation, right? So that's other things that occur as well. But there's a lot of push and pull factors. I didn't even mention them all.
Oh, I'm sure you know a zillion, your specialty. I mean, that makes a lot of sense to me, like the dropping off the diapers and stuff, because here's someone who maybe is struggling and no one else is helping. No one else is saying, here, let me give you something, quotes, for free. Let me care for you a little bit. That just makes a lot of sense that those people would start saying, well, I got somebody in my life here in the neighborhood that seems to care about me. Nobody else is. I don't have the government coming over here doing, hand delivering stuff to me like that, or I don't have, police officers or whatever. So I could see how people would fall into that. I mean, you hear that story. It's kind of like, cliche, but in New York, in one of the boroughs, the cops will take out the head drug dealer or the head gang member, and this was a guy that was throwing $100 bills from his second-story apartment into the street on New Year's Eve for everybody, and then there's a power scramble for who's going to control this guy's area. It becomes more violent. It gets scary. So yeah, all those things. That's really interesting. Shawn, can you tell us? It doesn't have to be gang related, but can you tell us, or probably isn't because you're probably younger, the first call you went on that you kind of got your heart going, gave you a little bit of a jump, hot call, if it were.
I was born in a small town, a smaller town than Toronto. I think there was 300,000 people there. Kind of a naive kid when it came to, police work or anything like that. So when I first came into Toronto, it was a huge culture shock. I mean,
I bet.
the buses ran, in London where I grew up, they only ran till 11 o'clock. I'm driving around the police car and I see these, I'm seeing the buses, still going on at 2 or 3 in the morning. I'm kind of confused. I had to ask my coach officer, what the heck's going on? And, he's, no, they run 24/7. Like, what's wrong with you? So that was kind of a shock for me. But, working in a gang impacted neighborhood is where I started. You can imagine, how naive I was to just about anything. I was just this kid that went to school and, and graduated, went down in the States for a wrestling scholarship, and then came back. And, I wasn't exposed to any of these neighborhoods before. So I was kind of thrown right into this gang impacted neighborhood. And I can remember distinctly one of these calls that I went through. It was a shooting. And shocked the hell out of me because I'd never seen anything like this before. I'd seen a dead body, but it was, at a funeral in a casket of my grandparents. Right. But I'd never experienced anything like that. I mean, this was, not the way you're supposed to see death, as a human being. Most of us go through life. We go attend funerals, and that's the only time that we see. Sure,
they're all dressed up. They're in their best clothes. They have makeup on.
Yeah. But to see somebody, shot one, but shot, dead, two, was just, kind of scary to, as a naive, and I was 30 at the time when I got on. So, I mean, I had life experience, but to see that, it shocked me. We got the call, it was a shooting. And of course, being a new, police officer, you're kind of like, okay, this is great. We're going to a shooting. It's going to be cool. Once you get there and you have the adrenaline rushing and whatnot, and then you start to process what is going on, you're going, oh crap, this is normal. This is not cool.
Yeah.
And there was, I remember blood everywhere. It was a apartment building. I know some of your viewers are thinking right now, like, this guy's from Canada. There's nothing bad happens up there.
Oh no, but Toronto's a huge city too. I mean, that's a major metro area.
Yeah. So, coach officer, of course, when he sees me, I'm kind of, stumbling, in my actions. So he's barking things for me to do, start, performing, first aid, what we can, try to preserve the body. And, it wasn't happening. The young lad wasn't going to make it. But we kept working and working. And, as you're doing these sort of things, you're seeing, CPR, blood coming out of the wound, blood coming out of the mouth or ears. I mean, I don't even know if that was part of that one, to tell you the truth, because I've been to so many things like that. But for me, it was kind of I remember it as one of my first calls. And just kind of, afterwards, and realizing that it was just over a wallet being robbed. It was a robbery.
Jeez.
And I, at that point, I was just part of the initial, I guess, response. I don't know what happened. I don't know if any arrests were made in regards to that, because it was so brand new, right?
I'm sure it was a blur.
Yeah, I mean, it was something that, like I said, a naive kid, not even a kid, sorry, 30 years old, but still naive, that never had any exposure. This was, oh crap. And then, unfortunately, it became a regular, I can't even say the word, but a regular occurrence up in our division. Our area was one of the predominantly areas in the city that had gang violence. And it had gang violence for quite some time. And I didn't even know, that was the case. I've heard of the area that I was working in, when I lived in London, and I grew up in London, but never thought much of it, because I never experienced gang violence or violence like that. If there was a shooting in my hometown at that time, you'd be like scratching your head like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
Toronto was more of a regular occurrence. So scary for me.
Oh yeah,
but
definitely.
Yeah, I can remember my coach officer barking at me and, telling me what he did, because I think I froze at first, just kind of, to see the amount of blood that was, and it was an apartment building, and the individual had been knocking on the doors for help. And nobody, and that's the problem with gang impacted areas. Nobody wants to help because they don't want to be seen helping.
Right.
Because they know that if they're seen helping, they might be the target of the next shooting. So, you see this long corridor with blood all soaked everywhere. And, and then you're in the lobby later on and you're like, wow, this is not so good.
Yeah, man, that's a tough first one. The, I wish cops a little bit, maybe it's better now, but I wish training officers did, like, a little bit better told you. 'Cause like you're gonna go to these first calls that cause your adrenaline to happen. You're usually going to get there and it's not going to be like you're wrestling or there's a gunfight, or so in other words, like you said, you have all this dump. You haven't learned how to regulate your response system yet. You're new to this. So your body just boom drops this adrenaline in and you're ready for anything. Your legs are jumpy and a lot of times you get there and it's just now stand still. Now, because that's the beauty of having a training officer being like, hey, grab the first aid kit, start CPR, do this, because you really are kind of just like outside the bubble. You're just kind of like, I thought your body's ready to fight and you're coursing with adrenaline. And then it's like a lot of nothing, kind of. It's more of a mental game at that point. I wish someone had said that to me, Yeah.
Well, I know you're wearing the badge and there's and the uniform and the expectation for you to do something too, right? So you're kind of froze because you're like, well, wait a second, this isn't normal. What am I? And you're starting to process it as a normal human being, not a police officer at the time, right? Well, I mean, a new police officer, I guess, and it's tough because if you didn't have your coach officer with there, you'd be kind of standing there maybe for a little longer until somebody go, "Are you going to do anything?"
Right.
Yeah, which would have been horrible for the public to nudge you. But thank God that we have coach officers who kind of prepare us for that sort of thing. I know when I started coaching, and I knew that I would have to, bring some of my new cadets or whatever, into these neighborhoods where that was going to happen. And it was always when it happened. If you're driving, I'd be talking about scenarios, and I'd be, and you tell the stories, but not only telling the stories, what you're doing is you're trying to prepare the individual. Listen, we have shootings around here. The first thing I need you to do is put up the damn yellow tape first, because that's paramount, and you know what, do it bigger than you have to. Like, create a huge scene. We can always bring it down afterwards. And so, you always kind of try to prepare them, because that's not, in the college, I don't remember if they ever taught that to us, where to put up police tape, or they may have taught us in theory, but for you to actually practically be out there on the road and say, hey, I got to, put this tape up. So you just give the person a nudge and, get them prepared. Right. So,
yeah. It's good for them to have a job too, to have something in their mind that they're going to do, Yeah.
Yeah.
Rather than standing there and just kind of, becoming hyper vigilant and taking in all that blood and the wound and all that stuff. Damn it. So did that rattle around your head for a little bit after that? Did you sleep well that night, or how did it go?
You know what? I'm lucky enough that I have a lot of, support mechanisms and things in play. At the time, I was still competing, in wrestling. So, I mean, I was, I was able to kind of, just have these outlets that I could, weightlifting, wrestling. I started jujitsu as well then as well. So, anytime something like that would happen, boom, you go in there and you try to regulate your body, right, into processing it. But I mean, those are things you don't forget. And those are just because it's we live a life of regularity at times. And then when you get put into a vocation like ours and we're exposed to the malevolence of the world, it can change you. So you really have to be cognizant of in ways and have those outlets to stay. And I'm sure, so it doesn't change, who you are or God forbid, put you in a state of depression or PTSD.
Yeah, absolutely. I so wish that, in high school I played played like baseball and I played some football and I even did basketball. I was terrible, but it was still fun to just be there, to be on the, they'd put me in almost for a joke, like, "Yeah, cheer for Steve." And then I did golf one year, but I never did wrestling. We did it like mandatorily in like gym class, but I never did the wrestling team. I think because it was, I don't know if the season was during, I think maybe all my buddies were playing basketball, so I just kind of did that. And now I'm like, I interview all these police officers, and they're all telling me how important jujitsu is, and it cognitively makes sense. Most fights end up on the ground, or we're starting with wrestling moves. We're not usually striking people. We're starting with trying to control someone's body, get compliant techniques. So it makes sense to me, but I'm 43 now, and like I don't want to start it, and I don't want like a 16-year-old kid to tie me up like a pretzel. You hear these stories about jiu-jitsu, like, "Oh, yeah, the instructor's daughter's 13, she's going to tap you out." It's like, it's not my ego. It's just like my body's kind of like, I've had a few injuries now, and I'm like, it just seems like, because I did do wrestling a little bit in high school, it's hard. Wrestling another human is so hard. And while I want the skills, I wish it was like the Matrix. They could just like shoot them into my brain and I could be a good wrestler. Yeah. But because I have buddies that do jujitsu, and I'm like, man, it just seems so hard. But they love it. They really love it when they get into it. Maybe it's just like just getting over that that hump, just trying it. I did do martial arts for like 5 or 6 years, and I really liked that. I ended up helping in like teaching the kids class towards the end. But that's not jujitsu. That's not like these guys. My one buddy got a new belt, and then he walked down like this line, and they all whipped him with their belts. I'm like, oh man, this sounds brutal. Yeah. But it's very masculine. It's very like a lot of camaraderie there, and it's good that a lot of that's missing from society now. A lot of that, people are all going their own way. People are isolated. They're not getting together. They're not like really, young boys aren't really testing their mettle in things like this, which I think is really good. What I'm telling you is I'm a pansy and I'm afraid to do jiu-jitsu. Can you motivate me, Shawn?
I'm not agreeing with you. You know what? Tell you the truth, I wrestled my entire life. My dad was a 3-time Olympian for Canada, so wow. Wrestling was my bread and butter. That is what I went to. Jiu-jitsu is kind of like, I'm retiring from wrestling. Let's take it down a key. I got to tell you, jiu-jitsu's been an interesting journey. When I first started going there, of course, the story talking about the 16-year-old girl, choking you out. Mm-hmm. I remember to my first, I was teaching, or I was training at a facilities that offered wrestling as well as jiu-jitsu, and the jiu-jitsu class was right after mine. So somebody had mentioned, "Hey, why don't you try it?" So I tried it. Of course, I spent a little time there doing it more and more. And there was people in the class. There's one jerk who choked me out, and he throws, after he chokes me out, he throws up his hands and he goes, "I just choked out at the cop." Of course. There's that embarrassment that that comes in, and I think that's what puts guys like yourself don't want that because because of that, right? And it's unfortunate that occurs. You just choked out a guy that knows zero about jiu-jitsu. So good for you, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And I can still remember the guy's name and everything too. But after years and years and years, not years, but a couple of years later, I was able to take on this guy. This guy was I think he was a brown belt, blue belt at the time. So one above blue. So I ended up, surpassing him afterwards, but, and motivated to do so as well.
Oh, I'm sure.
Yeah. But afterwards, I actually worked at the Toronto Police College, and I taught defensive tactics there and firearms. And we used to actually train every morning before work. And, that's where I think my skill levels went up quite a bit more, because again, every day before work, a group of guys would just go to the mat room. We'd arrive early, throw on our gis, and we'd actually train. And, of course, my philosophy too as well, wrestlers aren't good on their backs, and jiu-jitsu there's a good portion of that game where you're on your back, right? So, and we don't wear gis. So, when I personally liked no gi at the time. So, but when I was at the college, I flipped it. I said, you know what? I've got a weakness. I got to take care of this, because again, in policing, if you never know what happens. Like if you're in a room, and even with my background as a wrestler, let's say I'm in a room, I grab somebody, I trip over something. Now I'm on my back, and I've got this 400-pound, individual or 200-pound individual, feeding me his hand sandwiches, right? I'm in trouble, right? So, that's what I thought. Okay, I better learn to get off my back. So every time I did jiu-jitsu at the police college, I would put myself on my back and, and learn, the skills and the submissions from there. And it just became, because I had that luxury of being at the police college and just being around police officers and not having to worry about, being embarrassed, I guess, out in the public. I was able to excel, and that's, was good. And then, years later, after I became a black belt, you go out to a different club, and of course, I remember I'm a little older now, and, I've got the black belt on. And of course, when you have a black belt on, you're a target. Everybody in that wants to roll with you. Everybody wants to beat you up. And I remember this one kid, his name was Jason, and he came at me hard, and, I hadn't trained in a while. He tried his hardest, and I think he was, at one point, I think I got out of his submission, but I got up and I'm like, man, I'm not ready for this. I got out, because I actually saved myself with my wrestling abilities, got up on top of him, and I think we ended that session. I'm not sure if I tapped him out or afterwards. I think I did, but again, the ego was there. So kind of, when you're training outside of policing, it's kind of a little bit taxing, because there are people, and I call them headhunters in those rooms that want you, right? Whether because you're a police officer, like I said in the beginning, or if it's a black belt and you have a target on your back, it's kind of scary. So if you were going to start it, my advice to you is find a group of cops and do it with them.
Yeah, that's not a bad idea. Yeah, when you're a black belt, you have everything to lose, and the blue belt, purple belt, whatever, have nothing to lose. They're just gonna, if you win, it's like, well, yeah, he's a black belt. If he beats you, it's, man, I beat a black belt. This is sweet. Yeah,
exactly. And so it's for me, it becomes less, exciting to be in the room because I can remember people like coming at me like so hard, like, and I would just be like I remember this guy in particular. I'm taking it easy with him. He's coming at me hard every time. This was a police officer too, right? And I finally got sick of it. I said, I said to him, listen, if you're going to come at me all this time with this adrenaline and 100%, I'm going to come back at you at my level of 100%. Are you okay with that? He says, yeah. I came back at him 100%. He did not like it. You're holding off so that people will learn.
Yeah.
But once you've warned the person a couple times, hey, take it easy. You're here to learn. I think that at that point, that was my lesson. My gift to him was with a lesson of listen, I'm holding a lot back. You need to respect that.
Yeah, sometimes you got to pin them down and bite the neck, right? Like the wolf pack.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh man, when you're doing jiu-jitsu, do you ever just want to punch somebody in the face? I feel like I would get frustrated because I stink and I'd want to strike somebody.
Well, you know what? It doesn't, for me, because of my wrestling and because of jiu-jitsu, I've never, ever thought about striking. I can tell you, before I became a police officer, there was an incident at a bar in London. And, I'm a young kid. I think I was 19 years old. So 19 years is the age of drinking in Canada.
Nice.
I didn't know that. So I'm there with a bunch of friends, and they're drinking. And, I got a girlfriend there who's driving my car. So I'm a little inebriated as well. And at the end of the night, we're going back to the car. And then my buddy's girlfriend comes over to me and, she's screaming and yelling, says, John's in the bar. He's in a fight. So, of course, I'm crap. So anyways, by that time, John, he's out of the bar. So I grab John and I throw him into my car, the back of my car. Well, next thing I know, and it's this big old dude, he's beard, bald head. He's had to be about 45 years at the time. And I was 19. He just hauls off and cracks me right in the face. And, I'm perplexed because I'm just trying to get my friend into a car.
What did I do?
Yeah. So instincts just kicked in, and this is why I'm telling the story. Instincts kicked in, and I took him down in a double leg takedown. And at that point, I don't know what to do. And, he's at that point, he ends up biting me on my chest. So he's actually got a hold of my chest. But I'm wearing a denim shirt, so he's not piercing my pectoral. He's actually I can feel the skin grinding, but it's the denim is protecting me. So
that's how I fight. A lot of biting and pinching.
Yeah. In my head, I'm thinking, what's going on? Because I'm drunk. Right. So then I realize it, and that's when I start to hit. So, my first instinct is not to use my fist because of wrestling, and I think jiu-jitsu, because it's always about, control.
Dude, my dad told me when I was a kid, he said, if you get in fisticuffs and the guy wrestles, don't ever let him get his hands on you. If someone wrestles, they will tie you up and it's over.
Yeah. Well, that was the beauty of the skill set that my dad passed on to us, right? Because that's been, even policing, it's always been quick control, boom. If I ever had to use any force to arrest anybody, that was the case. And, I'm also lucky because of my size. I'm 6 foot and about 256 pounds right now. So not a lot of people challenge me.
That's nice. My chief is like that. My chief is like 6'2", 260. And just good to have on a scene, just standing around, looming around, if it's a fight or something. It's just like, I remember once we had a summer officer who was like, 6'4", 6'5". He's like 300 pounds. And usually summer officers on the Cape would just kind of ride with you, or they direct traffic or whatever. And I just told him, I was like, listen, we go to something, just stand right behind me. And if I point, just grab the guy. He's like, all right. And now he's a state prison guard, so that he does that for a living, grabs people. So.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, hell yeah. Definitely your stature can definitely be a huge bonus. I get that's where I get where I work it's very rural. We're out in I feel like people don't know it nationally or internationally that the western part of Mass is very very rural areas. It's almost like upstate New York, and we'll have shifts where departments put people on alone, and then like the state's your backup. So it can be quite a while. And when I look at people smaller stature or like I'm not big, I'm 5'10", 200, but it's like a normal size guy. I'm maybe but I've been a cop for enough years. But when I see people come on who are either small or like a small female and they're working alone, I always try to tell them you can go to those tools quicker. Like you can, that's okay. The courts have decided that. Taser, pepper, whatever. There's no shame in that. Go to the tools to help you out, because help is not around the corner. And when you get the person that's gonna screw with you, it's because they think they can take you. It's not, it's not gonna be someone your size who's like eyes you up. It's gonna be someone, is gonna be big. So thankfully you're a big dude and you have all those skills. So even if another monster comes at you, you can probably handle him. Put him in some kind of ankle break thing or something.
Something like that. Yeah. You know what? When we were working with the cadets coming through, one of the biggest things that I told them, if you're not training jiu-jitsu, not a wrestler, grab some pavement and do some cardio, because your cardio is your first line of defense, your first line of offense. If you don't have that, you're not going to be any good in the fight. So, you got to get to the battle. You're going to be forced at one point, within your career, but you should have your cardiovascular training because it's going to keep you in the fight longer than most people.
Well, absolutely. Yeah. And I saw that like early on. We had a female who was out of control, and there was like three of us dudes, and we were having trouble. Because if someone is out of their mind, or someone is really accessing that like primal fight or flight part of their brain, and they're getting all those chemicals in their blood, there was three of us, and we were trying to like not hurt her, but it was incredibly hard because she was so strong, because she was freaking out. You take now do that one-on-one with someone your own size. They're freaking out, but you're not. I mean, you're going to be winded real fast because as cops, we're always trying to we're trying to do it without hurting them. We're trying to subdue them when they're trying to attack initially, I mean, or even just doing do 3 minutes on a heavy bag. and you can barely pick your arms up. It's like if you're not in shape, you just can't. If you don't have the lungs, you're not going to make it, like you said. Absolutely. Yeah. So in jiu-jitsu, I didn't mean to turn this into a jiu-jitsu podcast, but I'm very interested. When you train, it's not always just a free-for-all, let's wrestle. It's like you're training specific moves, right? You'll be like, let's practice this move over and over. Is that what happens?
Yeah, I mean, you have your warm up, and then you'll go into the professor. Well, that's what they call the black belts. They'll go in and give specific moves. Sometimes there'll be drills to go on with them as well. But it won't be until the end of class where you actually do the sparring. And sometimes you can pick and choose who you spar with as well, right? And if you let them know that you have an injury, that's always good too, right? But then when you're in there long enough, you realize who the people you should avoid as well.
Right? Are you meaning like people that like go a little too hard or like don't really train when they're training? They're kind of getting a little too excited.
Yeah. So, generally, like somebody that joins at first a white belt, they become pretty aggressive in the beginning, and they're very spastic.
I could see that. That would be me for sure. It'd be like, life or death.
Yeah. They don't know what they're doing. So, and that's why it's important as a higher belt, you kind of got to, guide them a little bit, put them in positions. Okay, here's what you should do from here. And this is what you should try from here. It can become problematic, as you get higher. And I was that person too, right? But I was that person with a wrestling background. So, I was a little bit more of a problem for some of the higher belts, and they didn't like it when I first came in.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah. Cause you have a toolbox to fall back on. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Determination, technology, and street smarts. That's how you solve so many remarkable cold cases. If you or someone you know is frustrated and needs help, contact Tim Corbett at America's Cold Case Experts. It's not too late for justice. Visit coldcaseexperts.com now.
Shawn, let me shift gears here a little bit. Can you tell us about intense or terrifying moment from the job?
Yeah, and when I could talk about this one, it's case law. It's case law, I guess. But I'm working alone, middle of the day, in a neighborhood. Again, working in a gang impacted neighborhood, but there's certain areas like that are there that are. There's where a lot of the gangsters live, but then there's other like neighboring neighborhoods where there's houses and not so much. What I'm trying to say is like. So it's a mixed area, I guess, with different housing styles. That you've got the high rises, you got the community housing, you've got house owners as well in that area. So I'm working in a kind of an area close to one of our gang impacted neighborhoods, and we get a call to go to this address. There's a guy hiding in a backyard. He's just told the homeowner that somebody's been shooting at him. So, of course, lights the sirens, go down to this area. So I was actually pretty close because in their areas that were impacted by gangs, I tend to had a tendency just to stick around those areas. So I go in and I locate the gentleman. One of the officers that is with me, she arrives there as well. So I'm parking southbound, she's parking northbound. And as I'm getting the description of the individual, talking to this guy, I'm writing things down. I have my memo book out. The victim, he goes, "That's his car, and he's coming towards us right now."
Oh, so, great.
Around and I take a look, and of course the car slows and turns to avoid us because we were parked farther down the street from him. So of course I get in the car, my partner gets in her car, she goes driving through the neighborhood, I drive through the neighborhood. We can't find the car at this point, driving on for maybe a 30 seconds or 45 seconds, which seems like forever when you're looking for a suspect. But then I located the car and it was on a street, nobody in it. And, tinted windows. So you approach it cautiously, you look, nothing. And it's parked beside this parkette with this park. And I I'm thinking, okay, well, he's not around here. Where would he be? He could be in the backyards. So I took a guess, and I thought, okay, if I was him, I'd probably go into the park, right? Try to blend in or something like that. So I took the police cruiser, and I actually drove down there's a cement laneway that actually went down into this park. So it was down in a hill. And as I'm coming down the hill, I kind of turned the corner, and then the everything opens up to this, grass. There's grass. There's some water, some birds. People sitting on picnic tables eating their food. These old guys playing cards. And the first thing I see is the gentleman that he had described in the witness had described to me. So he sees me. We lock eyes, and of course. He runs, so I gun my car. So I'm chasing him with my car through this this grass, this park, and he gets to the tree line. I have to stop because I can't run my car through this tree line. There's thick trees, and so the tree line. There's trees that stops, and then it goes up this hill, and all the trees are up, on this hillside. Almost like we're going camping, running through the camp. So I get out of my car, don't have time to take my keys or anything like that. Just run out of the car. Now I'm running foot pursuit in the forest. I can hear my partner behind me. She's saying, "I'm behind you, Shawn. I'm behind you." Right? I'm running. I can still see him. He jumps the fence. And of course, I'm. You're dodging tree from tree. It's
Sure.
like an obstacle course. And at the same time, I have my hand on my pistol because I don't know if he has a firearm in his hand or not, right? I don't know where his firearm is. I know that he might have the firearm, might be back in the car, who knows? So I can't play that game. I can't say, he's the gun's in the car. I'm safe. I can't play that game. I gotta have my hand on my firearm in case I need it. So he jumps the fence. He goes into this backyard. I jump the fence. And at this point, I can hear, my colleagues screaming and yelling on the radio, trying to say, where are you? Where are you? Where are you? Right. And tell you the truth, I had no idea where I was. So you can, at that point, I mean, you kind of, your adrenaline's kicking in. You're a little bit scared. One, because nobody's going to be able to find you if something happens. And two,
you're all turned around.
Yeah, I don't know where I am because I just came out of this bush and I'm seeing the back of houses. I usually patrol in front where I would see, the front of the houses. I would know the streets where I am. I'm in the backyards where I don't recognize anything. And I'm chasing after a guy that potentially has a firearm. So, I jump in fences. And at this point, I know he can hear me because I'm this close to him. And I'm 240 pounds at the time. So I'm a little bit more fitter. I was training for the Olympic trials at the time too. So I was in a good shape so I could keep up with this lad. He was faster, but had it been no fences and anything, I'm sure he would have gotten quite a bit farther. While I was doing that, I was getting on the radio when there was free time and I was saying, he's coming towards you. He's coming towards you. I didn't know if they were coming towards you. I wanted him to hear me that I was saying he's coming towards you. So he actually changed direction.
Good tactic.
Yeah, but he went back into the forest. So he jumps over the fence and he jumps in, into the forest. And at this point, so there's an elevation. So there's he jumps the fence line, or sorry, the backyard that I'm in is here, and the hill goes down. So he jumps over the fence and he gets stuck in between the fence and a tree. So his torso is actually stuck between a body and a tree, and he's trying to wiggle himself out. So now I'm standing over top of him. And I give him the police challenge, please don't move. And I have my firearm out and pointed at him. He's got this look in his face, and I've never, ever seen, this look on anybody's face before. And it still haunts me to this day because, I'm thinking, what I'm at this point, I don't know what he's thinking, but he's got this look on his face. And I'll go back to what I was, how I felt afterwards. But he's reaching for something and in his he's fiddling with his lower portion of his body. And I'm telling him, I'm going to blow you,
Sure.
I think it came over the air. I used some commands, and then the air went silence. And I was told later, my unit commander came downstairs out of his office, and they were listening to the radio. Of course, it was because it was broadcast on our radio, and everybody's kind of had run out to support. But our unit commander was there with one of our OIC in charge of the station, and they're listening to it. The radio goes dead, and he goes to my sergeant. He goes, "Did Geris kill him?" Because the radio went dead, right? Because it was only because I was running, right? So. The guy actually wiggles free and gets out. So over the fence I go, and back through this maze of trees. It was like Return of the Jedi. Not the big redwood trees, but that's what I felt like. I was in this Return of the Jedi down on Endor. Here I'm running,
right.
Chasing after an Ewok or something. I don't know. But I'm chasing this guy still, and then I'm still saying the same thing. He's coming right towards you. He's coming right towards you.
You must be winded at this point.
Oh gosh. But yeah, I think if I hadn't been training for our trials at that time, I probably would have been winded. And I was winded, I believe too. But as I said that, he turned directions again, and he's going back into a backyard. Reached up, grabbed him, boom, on the ground, wrestling match. I was able to get control of him and handcuff and wait for support. And all by myself. That backup officer that was there, she said that she was running by me. She took off. I didn't know where she went. I think we lost her, in our running, right? She probably couldn't get over one of the fences or something like that.
Right.
So with me all the way, I get this guy. They finally find me. They take him off. We do a grid search of the, for any weapons. We locate a Glock pistol, which was right beside us. In my head afterwards, I'm playing this, playing it back in my head, and that look in his eyes to me was like, yeah, I'm gonna effing kill you. Yeah. That was my moment. I think that, everybody says that, with policing, there's at least one time where you have a brush with death. And I think that was mine there, because that look, I've never seen it on anybody. And he was looking for this weapon. He was stuck. So he probably would have used his weapon at that point had he not broken free. Thank goodness and thank God he did break free at that time, because I didn't get shot and I didn't have to kill him.
Yeah.
But afterwards, we took him back to the station, and this is all in the case law if you guys ever want to look at it. But they did the search of him, and they found that he had this makeshift holster on his thigh. So it was a belt that he had cut to fit his thigh, and that's where he had stuffed the firearm. It was the exact spot where he was actually looking to, when I said he was fidgeting for his lower body, he was looking for his firearm to utilize it on me. So yeah, it hit home. It was pretty scary. To this day, I worked with a kid, when I went back because I went to the college and then came back to the gang impacted area. I worked with a kid that used to love to get in foot pursuits, and I was getting foot pursuits with this guy, but I would always remember that, and be a heck of a lot more cautious, especially turning corners or, chasing anybody, because sometimes we'd have foot pursuits going through housing complex. Sometimes they were through the forests and stuff like that. But that was a memory for me that always, always stuck and protected me. Thank goodness. But I can tell you, working with that kid, I had to go to physiotherapy so many times just for the arches in my feet because foot pursuits.
Wow. That's crazy.
Yeah.
That many. Yeah, that's scary, man. Especially because your reaction is slower than action anyways. But when you're chasing somebody, how many times have you seen those videos when the guy just points straight back at the cop? It's like you don't have any time because you're thinking about so many things, your terrain, your running, your heartbeat, your eyes are jiggling. That's sketchy, man. Thank goodness he couldn't get that thing out. I mean, how do you afford a Glock but he couldn't get a good holster?
Yeah. I don't know. Yeah, I mean, it was It was scary. I'm just thank God, like I said, that he wasn't able to access it. Maybe, you know, if he had a proper holster, you know, would have been different, I guess. But thank goodness that, you know, with handguns, you know, these guys can't access them legally, right? And you can't. There's no carry and conceal weapon here,
right?
Which is kind of interesting because, you know, coming, you know, and going into Michigan and stuff, I talk to your young coppers down there all the time. And, you know, one was, yeah, I got a permit to carry it off duty. I'm like, we don't have that up here, you know, because they asked me, they look at me like I'm crazy. I'm like, yeah, we don't have it. The only way we can carry a firearm off duty is if our police chief says it's okay. And it's got to be, you know, to protect yourself from some sort of threat. So unless somebody has got a threat on my life, I can't carry my firearm off duty.
So yeah, so if you're doing an investigation where you've been threatened or there's a probability you're going to run into these people, you could get an approval from your chief to maybe carry to and from your house or something like that.
Yeah, well, we can carry to and from our house, but it can't be on person. It's got to be on person if the actual threat occurs. Like if there is actual threat where where my life, somebody says I'm gonna kill you, and I'm gonna go into your house and kill your wife and kids and stuff like that. That's when, okay, chief, here's the email, and okay, he'll authorize something like that. That's kind of like the guidelines, I guess.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, in the state of Mass, just by virtue of the fact that you're a sworn police officer, you can carry anywhere in the state. Well, actually now anywhere in the country, but anywhere in the state without a permit at all, just as long as you're a sworn police officer. And that goes back to, you know, I'm sure it goes back to like colonial times. But then we have the Leosa Act where if you've been a police officer for 10 years or longer and you leave the force, or if you're in active duty, you can carry anywhere in the state. And it's caused a lot of issues because it's like the feds wrote it up and it was very vague. And then it's a very litigious country. So it was like, well, wait a second. He's carrying a non-duty weapon, but did he qualify on it? Well, this guy killed a guy with an AR while he was camping, but he qualified at the police department. Does it say anything about assault rifles? And it's like, no, it just says firearm. It just says a weapon. So he actually was okay, you know. But it's like it caused a lot of problems because there's also cities like New York forever wouldn't honor it if they caught you in their city with a gun. Depend on the cop. One cop would say, "Hey, brother, don't worry about it. See you later." Another cop would take your gun and arrest you. And what would happen is you would go, from what I heard, you would go in front of the magistrate or judge and you would get your gun back and they would drop the charges. But I think it was more of like, we know we can't do this, but we really don't want you to. So if you do get caught, we're going to make it kind of a pain in your ass type of deal.
Yeah.
Shawn, I'm really interested in the UFC cornerman thing. We're on an hour now. I don't want to take too much. I know you work like crazy and have all this other stuff you do, but what is a UFC cornerman? It's just like boxing, right? Are you also the coach of the guy, or are you there just to remind him of technique and kind of have another set of eyes on the fight to let him know, like, he might not know what's going on and you can kind of look, hey, this guy's doing this. This is his tactic. Is that kind of the idea?
Yeah, all encompassing there. So I was Claude Patrick's cornerman, and then so I worked with Claude on his wrestling, and Claude was a proficient in jiu-jitsu. So when you're training for the UFC, or when you're training for mixed martial arts, you have pretty much three predominant arts: wrestling, Brazilian jiu-jitsu, and boxing. So you got to have coaches within those three domains. If you don't, you're going to be lacking in one area, and that'll be your chink in the armor, right?
Wow, so you need that. So that's like pretty complex. You need three coaches.
Yeah, and you have to dedicate time to each discipline, and that can be time consuming. And then if you don't pay attention to for instance, Claude was I think he was a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. If you decide that, hey, you know what, I'm good enough in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, so I'm just going to train striking and wrestling. Well, what happens when, you get caught in something Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, on the ground, you haven't been training for the last 6 months because you got a fight coming up. Well, not a good thing, right? So it's tough on the athlete. I did, I prepared for a mixed martial arts fight myself for one, just at a lower level. To dedicate yourself to all three arts is time consuming. So take my hat off to these athletes for doing it. But so we would work with Claude, I would work with Claude, on specific schedule, just wrestling, pure wrestling. And then he would go into, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, or he would go into, that after that. So with the UFC, you had to be licensed within that, jurisdiction. So Toronto had just got, approval from our licensing body to have UFC up in Ontario. So we had that. I got my license. Once you're licensed, then you can actually attend the venue. You can be in the corner. They're very, very strict in the corner. Wow. You can't stand up. So if I was in the corner, I have to sit on my stool. I have to sit there with the other individuals. The other three coaches. So the three coaches will be there with you. Usually striking, and wrestling and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. It could be karate if somebody, karate's, that's the dominant art. It depends on what your background is. So we would all sit there and you could so you could yell. Only one of those individuals is allowed in the cage at a time. So you can see, I've got pictures of me. So I made the choice because I said to Claude, his Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu guy had flown up from Las Vegas to corner him as well in this fight. So I said, listen, you go inside the cage. I'll just be outside the cage. So I just stood behind and I would yell. That's right. I would yell instructions from there.
Wow, so a lot goes into that.
Yeah. So just between each round, you really, and that's the thing, is you really have to watch the fight. You have to pick apart, the portions of the game that the other player has. So I had to study, his opponent and break down his techniques, and where, what techniques we had to implement to stop it. One of the opponents, he actually telegraphed his double leg takedown. He would always kind of, bounce almost. So I said to Claude, I said, he'll shoot when he bounces. So just keep an eye on that. So, and that's one of the things we keyed on, and, it worked for us. So, it was a fun process. It was kind of, we got to, corner him at the UFC at the Sky Dome, or I don't even know what they call it. He's just changed his name, Rogers Center from whatever it is now. But, it was pretty neat. And then I got to see, so a good buddy of mine was fighting on the main card, Randy Couture. But he was fighting. I have to see him lose, which is unfortunate, but, it was his last fight. So I got to see Randy's last fight too.
Wow, that's awesome.
While we're there, but I got to see it up front and personal, right there in the, next to the cage. So, I'm just trying to think, what else can I speak to? It's just,
it seems, not to take anything away from that, it sounds awesome, but when I was I think it was early college, late high school, when we first started, when it first came out, and there was like no rules. It was like, there was like, it was like a bloodbath. You only get a pay-per-view, and it would just be like a firefighter from the Bronx who was just like a brawler boxer guy versus, jiu-jitsu wasn't even like someone said jiu-jitsu and you were like, what is jiu-jitsu? But of course the Gracies ended up taking over. But that was friggin' exciting just to see two dudes. And there was like no rules. They could like do all kinds of weird. I don't know what the rules are now that are different, but I don't think they had gloves on.
No. It was,
and there was like groin shots, and like I remember this one guy did like a head and groin double elbow when he was on top of the guy. It was like, did he kill that guy?
I think that was Gary Goodrich that did that. A Canadian fella.
Oh, really? Canadians can fight, man. Canadians are brawlers.
Well, you know what? We had, when I was going to Eastern Michigan and wrestling there, we had a guy actually from Windsor, just across the border, named Dave Benedetto, and he was a wrestler. He wrestled in Canada, but he came over to the United States, came over to wrestle with us at Eastern Michigan. And one of my coaches was this guy by the name of Steve Frazier. And I don't know if you know that name. But in wrestling, he was the gold medalist at 84 Olympics in Los Angeles for you guys.
Oh, wow. Cool.
Dave came in. Dave was a big dude. Steve wasn't very big. He was probably I'm going to say 5'7", maybe, compared to Dave is 6'3" or 2, or somewhere around there. The size difference was quite a bit, but it was kind of funny because when they got in the room and they started going at each other, Steve kicked the snot out of him.
Really?
Like, just destroyed him. Just made him look like he didn't even belong in the wrestling.
Terrible.
Yeah. And with that being said, Steve did that to a lot of us, right?
Yeah.
But man, from there that the top athletes weren't in those fights at the time, because Benedetto was actually, that was in the early Royce Gracie days. But Dave, that wasn't a top athlete. That was just somebody that entered. He was had credentials, and that's the way the UFC kind of went for the longest time. Like. They would protect their fighters. It was more of an entertainment thing. They had a thing, and maybe you remember these names, but there was a guy named Rich Franklin that used to be a math school teacher from the Cincinnati area. He was their champion. There was a guy that was more talented, a guy by the name of Matt Lindland, who's a buddy of mine as well, Olympic silver medalist for your country. In Greco-Roman, but they wouldn't fight those two. They wouldn't have them fight each other. And Matt was the number one contender, but they wouldn't do it because they didn't want their pretty boy, because this guy looked like Jim Carrey, a better version of Jim Carrey.
Yeah. Another Canadian.
Yeah. But that's who he looked like. So they wanted that poster boy to sell the tickets to the shows. But Matt, he's not that aesthetically pleasing as Rich is. So, and that's,
It didn't take long to get that type of stuff involved, huh?
Yeah, so it never worked. He never fought. So unfortunately, that's one of the things that with me, when I start to watch the UFC, when I started to watch it, I knew that the top tier athletes weren't in that, from each sport weren't in that. And then it progressed, but still, they still protect their fights every now and then. You had people like Conor McGregor, who was protected for a while, and then he met somebody that could out wrestle him and pretty much dominate him.
Yeah. That was, I watched one of his fights a year or two ago when he lost, and the bravado and the cockiness looks really bad when you don't win. Like when you're kicking ass, it's like, he's the best. And then when you lose, it's like, you gotta have a little bit more humility, I think.
Yeah. Well, and when that's the problem when you pad somebody's resume by giving him easier fights or people that don't challenge his weakness. When you do get to that point, you're going to look like a fool, and that's nobody wants to be put in that position, but people with ego do.
Yeah. How about that? Ronda Rousey. Man, that was bad. I wish she just did that once and never came. I mean. Just go to Hollywood or whatever you got going on. You made enough money. You're starting to be in films. I think she really damaged her rep with those losses. Like she looked like who was it she fought? Nunes?
Yeah, I can't remember the name, but yeah, she looked pretty bad after the one fight there. It looked like she'd been.
She looked like she didn't even know how to fight. It was like this other girl just took her apart. But like you said, she had a very padded ring schedule, and she was pretty, and she was getting, she was good for the league. She was getting a big draw. So I think they hung her on as long as they could. But I think it was inevitable. They could not stop that fight from happening because this other girl was just such a contender. And it wasn't, it's embarrassing. I felt bad. You're watching, you're just like, oh man, this is clearly
she's in a better place. She's in the WWE, so she can exist in there without being challenged.
That's right, absolutely. And probably a bunch of those people don't even know who she is because they were. I barely knew who Kent Shamrock was when I was watching WWF because he was kind of one of the great UFC guys that came when it started to become more legit. I was kind of watching it more when it was like bar brawlers. But Shawn, before I let you go, can you just give some advice to to young people getting into police work? What if you had some sage advice to tell them, what would you say?
You know, you got to really, really, this is tough because, I just did this for a kid, and I told you about this earlier. A kid that, I used to wrestle for me when I coached at York University, and he was murdered by he's ambushed.
Yeah, basically. I'm so sorry about that. Yeah, we were supposed to have an interview, and that it happened right then. It's awful.
Yeah, so Greg was a tough kid. He had all those he was a Brazilian jiu-jitsu brown belt. He wrestled for me at a college level, very talented. All I can say is that when you go into the unknown, have your eyes open and be aware of your surroundings, be aware of what could happen. Don't take things lightly when you're approaching vehicles. I don't know if that's what happened with Greg, because I don't want to see the body cam footage. It'd probably make things worse for me. But you really, keep yourself safe. And you do that by, training in an art that keeps you proficient, keeps your fighting proficient. Keep your mind, just keep your mind sharp. Don't get complacent. We always talk about complacency. I'm just going to go up, but it's another, vehicle stop. It's nothing. Oh, I'm helping a family. That's what Greg was he was helping somebody get out of a ditch, and then he was executed for doing that. He was taking, that was it. No chance. Had he had a chance, he probably would have won that fight because of his skill set. But it was a cowardly act. You can't really prepare for that unless you can prepare mentally for that when you're approaching the vehicle, right? We do that in the college when we prepare you guys, the cadets to come out. But we really, I think, as trainers, really have to make that hit home. The other thing too is, we talk about the job changing us. Have support mechanisms in place. Have different outlets you can go to. I can tell you, and don't think when shit happens that you're Superman or you're Supergirl, because you need to cry. You need to take the time for yourself. I'm a big dude, and I'm pretty tough. But when Greg was murdered, man, I was just a pile of mush, So, you have to take the time to recover too, because you don't take the time to recover, you're going to do more damage in the long run, where, we don't want to show emotion. And I think that's with policing in general is we put on the uniform. We think that we have to be tough. We can't show any weakness, but you're a goddamn human being. You have weaknesses, and you need to treat them, and you need you need help, whether it's, physical or whether it's mental. You need it. You really do. And that's I guess that's my advice, is just kind of take care of yourself in any way and every possible. We will take care of our dog better than we take care of ourselves. We will take it for the medication. We'll make sure it gets the medication. We'll get it thunder jackets if there's thunder outside. We treat our dogs better than we treat ourselves. For Christ's sake, if you're doing this job, there's so many, bouts of malevolence you're going to run into or be part of that are going to affect your psyche. You need to sit down, and you need to realize that, you're not human, and you need to take care of you. You need to make yourself a better person. So think of it that way, I guess. If you have a dog, you need to start treating yourself better than you treat your dog.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great way to put it. Great advice, Shawn. And an example of that is me. I grew up playing sports and was always active. I go to the gym and all that, and then all kind of fell by the wayside. I'm 43 now, and I just started a couple months ago doing kettlebell workouts. And the first one I did, like 10 minutes in, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm weak. I'm weak, and I have no lungs. I was in my basement alone, embarrassed for myself. I was like, oh my gosh, this is terrible. It's like you wear all the gear, the gun belt, all that, and sit in your car for a few hours to get out. I'd be like, oh, I'm making noises. I remember, like old guys making I'm like, geez, this is, this is not good. So yeah, I thankfully I kind of realized that too. I think we kind of forget too, like complacency. I'm not a 25-year-old kid. I'm a 43-year-old guy. It's, unfortunately, it's not the same.
Yeah.
So just on the physical aspect. But before you take off, can you tell us a little bit about the podcast you're doing, Engage 416?
Yeah, so our initiative is all about getting gang members out of gangs. We're trying to basically prevent them from getting into the gangs by treating those risk factors that I talked about in the beginning of the podcast. Treating them, so we're trying to treat the wound before we treat the symptoms, right? So that we stop it. It's a different approach. It's not a popular approach in policing, but it's coming along. We have mitigated gang violence in areas of our city by 30% with some of the stuff that we've done.
Wow.
Through some of our preventative measures, and you know, it's some of these measures are, you know, they're evidence based, so they work. They've been proven to work. We stole them from you guys down in the U.S., so it's nothing new to you guys. But you know, we've made them work up here for us. We've developed neighborhood teams to identify individuals in need of help or that experience a lot of these risk factors, so that we can actually, you know, put these individuals in our program. We have over 1,800 people enrolled in our referral program currently that are seeking help. So,
that's
you know,
awesome.
The podcast that I do it, I do a live stream daily, but the podcast that I do on YouTube is our Engage 416 YouTube channel. But I do a lot of guests. I've talked about UFC. I've talked about the guys that I've interviewed there.
You've had gang members on, right? Or ex-gang members came on?
Yeah, I had actually a guy, U.S. He shot and murdered somebody, went to prison for it, and he came out a born-again Christian. He's trying to save gang members as well.
I love it.
Not lifestyle. UFC champ Frank Shamrock, Ken's brother, who you had mentioned, but Frank's a good friend of mine. So he came on the show. I had an Olympian as well, but most of these people face adversity. And what I try to demonstrate is that, you know, you're going to face things in your life, but it's not going to end you. It's going to, it may make you even stronger if you take a look at what it did to you and then try to safeguard yourself against it. So
that's awesome, man. It sounds fascinating. I'll put a link to that in the show notes along with your social media stuff and all that. Shawn, thank you so much for coming on, brother. Great interview. I really, really honored that you were able to make it.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Steve. And I apologize for the, for not getting to there sooner or later, but
not at all.
I'm glad we did this.
Absolutely. Can you hang on for like 30 seconds when I just do the outro?
Yeah, I'm going to try because my battery's dying.
Okay. I'll make it quick.
Yeah. Okay.
Guys, the great Shawn Geris. What a fun interview, man. That was awesome. Now is the time in the show when I thank the Patreon sergeants. These are the people that love and support the show and whom I love. I thank you guys so much. Let's get to the roll call here. I'm talking about Derek Warden, Scott Young, Wayne M. Miller, Nick Noose, the great Tom Connell, Just Dennis, George Tessier, Motor Cop Chronicles, Greg Gadboy, Ben Peters, Scott Minkler, the great Tammy Walsh, Sean Clifford, Braden Walker, Sasha McNabb, Corey Payne, the great Mike Wynn, Nathan Gowan, Jason Lau, Dylan Pyrozic, Lauren Stimson, Brandon Hooker, Jake Pinedo, John Shoemaker, James Rose, the great Seth Wright, Tony Fahey, William James Long William James Long. That's Deputy William James Long to you, no longer of investigations. Andy Biggs, the great Chris June, Adam Mehall, Gary Steiner, and Lane Campbell. Thank you to you folks for the constant and repeated support. I really appreciate it. I will see you guys next week.